For the first time, Sacramento police now have a written policy in place about when officers can turn off their body cameras. It comes after two officers reportedly muted their camera microphones during this shooting, that fatal shooting of Stephon Clark, you'll recall, in his grandmother's backyard. The new rules require officers to actually record on those cameras why they are turning them off.
If it's a sensitive type interview with a victim, whether it be, a sexual assault or something that is sensitive in nature, if they're talking to a doctor or nurse.
I just think that we need to be proactive instead of reacting after things happen. I feel like there needs to be some actions taken to those officers that did that, or the one that suggested turning it off, because that's not transparent, and the whole reason body cams exist is for transparency.
So as you heard, officers can turn off body cameras if they're talking with a sexual assault victim, or perhaps a witness or a victim refuses to talk on camera, or when the officer is talking to a doctor, nurse, or paramedic. The use of deadly police force is a hotly debated topic. Just this week, we received the body cam video of an officer-involved shooting in Louisville, Kentucky, where a suspect holding a screwdriver lunged at officers and was shot and killed. The Louisville PD is now investigating that shooting. I want to welcome Luther Tyus. He's a former police officer with the St. Louis Police Department to the show to talk about this. And this was brought about because you wrote a very interesting article, a very thoughtful piece for CNN.com. You actually talked about this in your article, that you were a police officer when you faced a situation where you, in a moment, had to decide whether to shoot or not. Can you tell us about that really briefly?
Oh, well, that happens all the time as a police officer.
Yes.
Changes in blindness is something that's taught in police departments throughout the nation. So we all know about it. And like I said, it's when your mind is under a certain level of duress. And sometimes you see things that aren't there, and sometimes you see things that are there. And in the op-ed that I wrote about, it was a hammer. And in my own personal experience, sometimes it was a cell phone or a bottle or something else that at first I thought it was a gun.
You wrote in this op-ed about why officers choose to kill, and you say that we have to, it's really important that we understand how the brain works, right? In moments of duress, in moments of danger, that the old brain takes over. That old brain is about survival.
Right. Right. So the old brain, and that's interesting because the old brain will overcome a camera. It will overcome anything because it just, like you said, it wants to survive. And it will do whatever it has to do. It will run or it will fight when you're there on that spectrum of the scale from fight, flight, freeze, posturing, or submission.
So how do we train an officer then to not let the old brain take over? Or is that even possible? Because we're human after all, right?
You're right about that, but it definitely is possible. We see most of the science that I'm talking about is military science. And then we also see it in Dr. Bill Lewinsky's work when he did some interesting informational work on SWAT officers versus rookies and early officers. And he said SWAT officers make less mistakes. And it was because of how they were training, and how they were training to understand their environment and how, when they're in certain situations, how to respond.
So in your mind, it comes back to training. It comes back to changing the way we train our officers to deal with those perhaps life or death situations?
Definitely, definitely. So when it comes to this type of training, we need to understand what it is and what it's not. It's not implicit bias, even though it's good training. It's not de-escalation, even though that's good training. This is the next step in police innovation. We're talking about the psychology of how the mind works.
How open will police departments be to looking into this kind of training?
Well, right now we're working on the research. We're giving it the teeth and the girth that it needs to. Hey, and then specifically, we want to be able to measure if it's working with officers or not. And I know that's not, when it comes to police training, you don't have a lot of measurements to see, okay, is this working or is it not working,
No, absolutely. There's not like, it's not like who gets closest to the pin. It's either yes or no.
Right.
All right, well, as you continue to work on this, I'd love to hear more. What I love about it is there are a lot of people, smart brains, people with experience like you, that are coming to the table with solutions, because we all recognize something has to change. Luther Tyus, thank you so much for writing that op-ed and being willing to talk about it with me. I appreciate it.
I appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thanks.